I need to get this out because I'm still processing what happened, and honestly, I don't know if I'm going crazy or if this is real life. Last Tuesday was our 10-year anniversary. 10 years of what I thought was a solid marriage. Turns out it was 10 years of me being the biggest fool on the planet. Let me back up. My name's David, I'm 34, and I thought I had it figured out. Good job in construction management. Nice house that I worked my ass off to buy. And Laura, my wife of 10 years. We met in college at a party thrown by mutual friends. She was studying marketing, I was doing engineering. She was this bubbly, outgoing girl who could talk to anyone, and somehow she picked the quiet guy in the corner who was nursing a beer and watching everyone else have fun. We dated for 3 years, got married right after graduation when we were both 24. Looking back, maybe we were too young, but everyone said we were perfect together. She was the social butterfly, I was the steady provider. She handled our social calendar, I handled the bills. She decorated our apartment, I fixed everything that broke. Her family was always a big part of our relationship. Hilda, her mother, worked in real estate and always had opinions about everything we did. Angela, her younger sister, was in college studying business and always seemed to be around needing money or advice or both. They were tight-knit in a way that sometimes made me feel like an outsider, but Laura always said that's just how her family was. They looked out for each other. I grew up with just my grandmother after my parents died in a car accident when I was 16. My grandmother, Marley, raised me through high school, helped pay for college, and always told me to find someone who would be my family. When I met Laura and her close-knit clan, I thought that's exactly what I'd found. Our 10th anniversary started like any other Tuesday. Laura was up early getting ready for work at the marketing firm where she'd been climbing the corporate ladder for the past 5 years. She kissed me goodbye, same as always, but mentioned she had something special planned for that evening. She wanted to celebrate at home instead of going out to some expensive restaurant, said she preferred intimate celebrations over public displays. I should have known something was off. Laura loved showing off. She was the type who posted every date night on Instagram, who always wanted the best table at the busiest restaurant so people could see us. But I was too focused on work to think much about it. I had a big commercial project wrapping up and my mind was on deadlines and budget overruns. When I got home that evening, the house smelled incredible. Laura had made my favorite meal, pot roast, with all the sides my grandmother used to make, candles on the table, good wine already breathing, soft music playing. She'd even worn the red dress I bought her for her birthday 2 years ago. During dinner, she kept bringing up memories from our wedding, talking about how far we'd come, how much we'd built together. She thanked me for working so hard to give us this life, for being the kind of husband who always put family first. Every word felt genuine. Every smile looked real. After dinner, I gave her the necklace. White gold with a small diamond pendant that she'd been admiring for weeks every time we passed that jewelry store on Main Street. She actually started crying when she opened the box, telling me I was too good to her, that she didn't deserve someone who paid attention to the little things like that. $2,000 was a stretch on my salary, but seeing her reaction made every overtime hour worth it. She put it on immediately and kept touching it throughout the evening, looking at herself in every reflective surface we passed. Around 9, her phone rang. She glanced at it and her face changed for just a second. This quick flash of something I couldn't quite read. Then she smiled and said it was her mom calling about some neighbor drama. Hilda was having issues with the people next door and needed Laura to calm her down before it escalated. Laura always handled her family's problems. Hilda called her for everything from relationship advice to tax questions. Angela texted her daily about school stress and boy troubles. I'd gotten used to being the secondary priority when family drama erupted, which seemed to happen at least once a week. She grabbed her wine and headed to the bedroom, saying she needed to take the call somewhere quiet because Hilda would probably be worked up. I settled in the living room with the baseball game and my own glass of wine, expecting her to be back in 15 minutes with some story about property lines or parking disputes. That's when I heard it. The bedroom door wasn't completely closed and voices carry in our house. At first it was just Laura's voice and I assumed she was listening to Hilda vent about whatever neighborhood nonsense was happening. But then I heard laughter. Multiple voices. Cackling, actually. They had her on speaker. I got up to grab the wine bottle from the kitchen for a refill, and that's when I caught the words that stopped me dead in the hallway. Laura was saying she was sick of pretending to be attracted to me, that every time I touched her she wanted to shower immediately afterward, that she'd been counting down the days until she could stop this charade. But it got so much worse. Hilda's voice came through crystal clear, asking exactly how much longer Laura needed to keep playing the devoted wife. Laura's response made my blood turn to ice. She said just until the inheritance from my grandmother finally cleared next month. Apparently, they'd done their homework and knew exactly when that money was scheduled to hit my account. $50,000 from my grandmother's estate that had been tied up in probate for 2 years. Angela's voice joined in, making some comment about how pathetic I was, how I'd buy Laura anything she wanted if she just mentioned wanting kids someday or got a little teary-eyed about our future together. They were all laughing about the anniversary necklace, calling me a trained dog who performed tricks for treats. But the worst was yet to come. I heard a male voice join the call and recognized it immediately. Brady, my best friend since we were 15 years old. The guy who was my best man at our wedding, who came to our house every weekend to watch games, who I'd called when my grandmother died, because I needed someone to help me through the grief. Brady's voice was casual, like he was discussing the weather, as he talked about how easy I was to fool, how I never suspected anything even when he was sleeping in my house, using my shower, eating food I paid for. He mentioned specific dates when he and Laura had been together while I was working late or out of town for job sites. The three of them started swapping stories about close calls, times when I almost caught them, times when they thought I was getting suspicious. They were laughing about a weekend last month when I came home early from a work trip and found Brady on our couch. He'd told me Laura had called him over to fix a leaky faucet. I'd actually thanked him for helping out and offered him a beer. Laura mentioned she'd already been moving money to a separate account for months. Small amounts that I wouldn't notice missing from our joint checking. She'd been photographing important documents, copying passwords, basically preparing to disappear with everything she could get her hands on. The conversation went on for 25 minutes. I stood in that hallway listening to my wife, her family, and my best friend dissect every aspect of my personality, my habits, my weaknesses. They talked about me like I was some kind of science experiment they'd been running for a decade. When Laura finally came back to the living room, she had this perfect smile plastered on her face. She asked if I wanted to watch a movie, curled up next to me on the couch, and spent the rest of the evening playing with that necklace and telling me how much she loved me. I poured her more wine, kissed her forehead, and told her I loved her too. Because right then, sitting there with her head on my shoulder while she traced patterns on my chest, I realized something important. If she could run a 10-year con, if she could lie to my face every single day while planning to destroy my life, then I could play games too. See, Laura made one critical mistake in all her planning. She assumed I was the same naive 24-year-old she married. But 10 years in construction management changes a man. You learn how to read people, how to spot when subcontractors are trying to screw you over, how to protect yourself legally when deals go bad. You learn that the friendly handshake means nothing if you don't have everything in writing. More importantly, my grandmother didn't just leave me money when she died. She left me something far more valuable than $50,000. She left me her lawyer, a sharp old guy named Stetson who'd been handling her affairs for 30 years and had seen every kind of family drama you can imagine. The next morning, Laura left for work like nothing happened, kissed me goodbye at the door, same as always. Soon as her car disappeared around the corner, I made a phone call to my grandmother's attorney. Turns out when you inherit money, you can put conditions on how it's distributed. You can also protect assets in ways that would surprise people who think they're smarter than you are. I've spent the last week documenting everything, not just recording conversations or taking pictures. I mean really documenting financial records, timeline inconsistencies, digital footprints. It's amazing what people leave lying around when they think you're too dumb to notice. Brady's been texting me about hanging out this weekend. Laura's been extra affectionate, probably trying to keep me happy until the inheritance hits. Her family's been unusually nice to me lately too. Hilda even invited me to Sunday dinner next week. The inheritance money is supposed to transfer this Friday. Laura has no idea that I know. Brady has no idea that I know. Her family has no idea that I know. They're all just waiting for their payday, thinking I'm going to hand over $50,000 to fund my wife's escape plan. What they don't know is that I've been waiting too. Waiting and planning and making sure that when this whole thing comes crashing down, I'm not the one left picking up the pieces. The money transfers Friday. Laura probably plans to file divorce papers the following week, but I've got some surprises planned first. I'll update you guys after everything goes down. This is going to get interesting. Update 1. The response to my last post was incredible. Shout out to everyone who said I should document everything and get a lawyer involved. You were absolutely right. Also, to the commenter who said Laura probably isn't as smart as she thinks she is, you called that one perfectly. It's been 5 days since I overheard that phone call. And let me tell you, living with someone who thinks you're an idiot while you're planning their downfall is surreal. Laura's been acting like the perfect wife, probably trying to keep me happy until the money transfers tomorrow. Brady's been texting me daily about hanging out this weekend. Hilda actually called me yesterday to chat about how proud she is to have me as a son-in-law. The level of performance they're all putting on would be impressive if it weren't so disgusting. But here's what they don't know. While they've been patting themselves on the back for running such a clever con, I've been 10 steps ahead of them. Remember how I mentioned my grandmother's lawyer? Well, Stetson turned out to be exactly the kind of sharp old bastard you want in your corner when someone's trying to screw you over. The morning after I overheard their little planning session, I called his office at 8 a.m. sharp. Told him I needed to discuss the inheritance and some concerns about asset protection. He cleared his schedule for that afternoon. When I walked into his office, Stetson took one look at my face and said I looked like a man with problems. So I told him everything. The whole sordid story, from the anniversary dinner to the phone call to my suspicions about what Laura had been planning. This guy listened to every word without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad in handwriting that probably hadn't changed since 1975. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and asked me one simple question. What did I want to accomplish here? That's when I realized I'd been thinking about this all wrong. I'd been focused on stopping Laura from taking my money. But Stetson made me see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about $50,000. This was about 10 years of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. This was about my best friend sleeping with my wife in my own house. This was about an entire family treating me like their personal ATM while laughing behind my back. Stetson explained that the inheritance came with certain legal protections I hadn't fully understood. My grandmother had been through her own messy family drama back in the day, and she'd structured things to prevent exactly the kind of situation Laura was trying to pull. The money couldn't just disappear into a joint account where Laura could access it. There were specific legal requirements about how inherited assets are treated in a marriage, especially when there are questions about the recipient's best interests. But more importantly, he started asking questions about our financial situation that made me realize just how deep this betrayal went. When he asked about our joint accounts, I mentioned that Laura handled most of our day-to-day banking since she was better with numbers. That's when he suggested we take a closer look at where our money had actually been going for the past few months. We spent 3 hours going through bank statements, credit card bills, and financial records. What we found made my blood boil. Laura hadn't just been moving small amounts to a secret account like she'd bragged about on that phone call. She'd been systematically draining our savings for over a year. Remember when she said she wanted to renovate the kitchen, and I agreed to let her handle getting quotes from contractors? Turns out she never got any quotes. That $8,000 went straight into an account I'd never heard of. The vacation she'd been planning for our anniversary that we supposedly had to cancel because of my work schedule. She'd never made any reservations, but the $3,000 I'd given her for the trip had vanished. Even smaller things started making sense. She'd been volunteering to pick up groceries, handle utility bills, manage our household expenses. I thought she was being helpful. She was actually skimming money at every opportunity and covering her tracks by telling me prices were higher than they actually were. Stetson calculated that she'd stolen nearly $15,000 over the past 18 months. Not enough to be immediately obvious, but enough to fund whatever escape plan she had cooking with Brady and her family. That's when he made a suggestion that honestly hadn't occurred to me. Instead of just protecting the inheritance money, why not go on the offensive? Laura had committed theft, fraud, and who knows what other financial crimes. Brady had been a willing participant in destroying my marriage. Hilda and Angela had been actively encouraging and planning the whole scheme. But here's the beautiful part. They thought they were dealing with the same trusting guy who'd been letting them walk all over him for years. They had no idea that I'd figured out their game, let alone that I was building a case against all of them. Stetson suggested we let them make the first move, let Laura file for divorce thinking she was going to get half of everything, including the inheritance. Let Brady think he was going to ride off into the sunset with my wife and my money. Let her family believe they'd successfully manipulated me for a decade without consequences. Because once they showed their hands, we'd be ready with evidence of theft, fraud, adultery, and conspiracy. Not only would Laura get nothing in the divorce, she'd likely face criminal charges. Brady could be sued for alienation of affection and conspiracy. Even Hilda and Angela could face charges for their role in planning and encouraging the scheme. The past few days have been the most surreal of my life. I've been playing the role of the oblivious husband while watching Laura perform her own act as the loving wife. She's been extra attentive, probably trying to make sure I don't get suspicious before the money transfers. She cooked my favorite meals, suggested we watch movies together, even initiated intimacy more than she has in months. Every time she touches me or tells me she loves me, I want to confront her right there. But Stetson made me promise to wait. The inheritance transfers tomorrow morning, and according to the timeline I overheard, Laura plans to file divorce papers early next week. He wants to catch her in the act of trying to claim rights to money she was never entitled to in the first place. Brady's been playing his role too. He texted me Wednesday asking if I wanted to grab beers this weekend to celebrate the inheritance coming through. Said he was excited for me and wanted to help me figure out how to invest it wisely. The audacity is breathtaking. Yesterday, Hilda called me out of nowhere to chat about family and how grateful she was that Laura had found such a good man. She went on for 20 minutes about how family loyalty was the most important thing in life, how blood was thicker than water, how she'd raised her daughters to always put family first. The irony was so thick I could barely keep from laughing. Angela texted me a long message about how she'd always looked up to me as the big brother she never had, how she hoped to find someone as dependable and generous as me someday. She even mentioned how she'd been telling all her friends about what a great husband I was and how lucky Laura was to have me. They're all laying it on so thick it would be comical if it weren't so calculated and cruel. But the hardest part is watching Laura. 10 years of marriage and I thought I knew this woman inside and out. Now I'm seeing her with completely different eyes. And it's terrifying how good she is at this. Every smile looks genuine. Every laugh sounds real. Every time she tells me she loves me, she looks me straight in the eye without a hint of deception. I keep thinking about our early years together, wondering how much of it was real and how much was performance. Did she ever actually love me? Or was I always just a mark? Was she planning this from the beginning, or did it develop over time? When did I stop being her husband and start being her target? The inheritance money transfers to my account tomorrow at 9 a.m. By tomorrow night, Laura will probably think she's won. She'll start making her move, probably suggesting we celebrate by opening a joint investment account or talking about some major purchase that requires access to the funds. But she has no idea that Stetson and I have spent the week building an airtight case against her and her whole family. Every stolen dollar traced and documented. Every lie cataloged and verified. Every conversation I overheard carefully noted and prepared for legal proceedings. The money transfers Friday morning. Laura makes her play Friday night or Saturday. And by Monday, when she thinks she's filing divorce papers to claim half of everything, she's going to walk into the biggest legal nightmare of her life. I'll update you guys this weekend after everything goes down. Based on the messages some of you sent, I think you're going to enjoy seeing how this plays out. Update 2. You guys are not going to believe what happened this weekend. Remember how I said the inheritance was transferring Friday morning and Laura would probably make her move that night? Well, she didn't disappoint. Neither did Brady or her family. And now they're all scrambling like rats on a sinking ship. Thanks to everyone who sent messages of support after my last update. Special shout out to the person who said this was better than any soap opera. You haven't seen anything yet. So, Friday morning, the $50,000 hit my account right on schedule. I got the notification on my phone while I was having coffee and pretending to read the news. Laura was getting ready for work, humming in the bathroom, probably thinking her payday had finally arrived. I didn't say anything about the transfer, just went to work like normal. But around lunchtime, Laura texted me asking if I wanted to celebrate something special that evening. She suggested we open a bottle of champagne and talk about our future. The timing wasn't exactly subtle. I played along and said I'd pick up champagne on my way home from work. I even asked what we were celebrating. Acting confused, she replied with some nonsense about celebrating our marriage and all the good things coming our way. The woman has nerves of steel, I'll give her that. When I got home Friday evening, Laura had prepared another elaborate dinner setup. Candles, good china, the works. She was wearing the necklace I'd bought her for our anniversary, which now felt like a sick joke. She kept touching it throughout dinner while telling me how much our marriage meant to her. After we finished eating, she brought out 2 champagne glasses and suggested we toast to new beginnings. That's when she dropped the bomb I'd been expecting. She said she'd been thinking about our financial future and suggested we should consider putting the inheritance money into a joint investment account where we could both access it easily. I played dumb and asked why we needed to change anything. The money was safely in my personal account that I'd had since before we were married. What was the rush to move it around? That's when Laura's mask started slipping just a little. She got this tight smile and explained that married couples should share everything equally, that keeping large sums in separate accounts wasn't healthy for a relationship. She said she'd already researched some investment options that would give us better returns than just letting the money sit in a regular account. I asked her to explain these investment options in more detail. What kind of returns was she talking about? How liquid would the investments be? Did she have specific companies or funds in mind? Laura couldn't answer a single detailed question. She kept giving vague responses about how she'd handle all the research and paperwork, how I shouldn't worry about the technical stuff since she was better with financial planning. She just needed me to sign some forms and provide access to the account. That's when I decided to push a little harder. I told her I appreciated her looking out for our future, but I wanted to understand exactly what she was proposing before moving $50,000 anywhere. I suggested we schedule a meeting with a financial advisor so I could get professional advice. Laura's reaction was immediate and telling. She said we didn't need outside advice, that financial advisors just wanted to take fees and commissions. She insisted she'd done enough research for both of us and that waiting would cost us money since the best investment opportunities wouldn't be available for long. I kept asking questions, acting like the concerned husband who wanted to make sure we were making smart decisions. What specific investments was she considering? Could she show me the research she'd done? Did she have contact information for the investment companies she'd mentioned? The more I pressed for details, the more agitated Laura became. She started talking about trust and partnership, saying that a husband should be able to rely on his wife's judgment. She reminded me that she'd been handling our household finances successfully for years and had never steered us wrong before. Finally, I told her I needed some time to think about such a major financial decision. I said I wanted to sleep on it over the weekend and maybe we could revisit the conversation on Monday, after I'd had time to process everything. Laura did not take this well. She started arguing that opportunity costs were real, that every day we delayed was money lost. She brought up examples of friends who'd made smart investment decisions early and were now financially secure. She even mentioned her mother's experience in real estate and how Hilda had always taught her to act quickly when good opportunities presented themselves. The argument went on for over an hour. Laura used every manipulation tactic in the book. She appealed to my emotions, questioned my trust in her, brought up all the ways she'd supported me over the years. She reminded me of sacrifices she'd made, compromises she'd accepted, dreams she'd put on hold for our marriage. When emotional manipulation didn't work, she tried logic. She pulled up websites on her laptop showing investment returns and market trends. She had charts and graphs ready to go, which told me she'd been planning this presentation for a while. When logic failed, she went back to emotions. She got teary-eyed, talking about our future together, about the family we might want to start someday, about how this money could be the foundation for everything we'd dreamed of building together. I almost felt sorry for her. The performance was incredible. If I hadn't overheard that phone call, I probably would have signed whatever papers she put in front of me. But I held firm. I told her I needed the weekend to consider everything, and that rushing into major financial decisions wasn't my style. I reminded her that the money had been tied up in probate for 2 years, so a few more days of patience wouldn't hurt anything. Laura went to bed angry that night. She barely spoke to me Saturday morning, giving me the cold shoulder treatment that I now recognized as another manipulation tactic. But by Saturday afternoon, her attitude had changed completely. She started being overly affectionate again, probably thinking she needed to soften me up for another attempt. She suggested we invite Brady over for dinner Sunday night to celebrate the inheritance. Said it would be nice to share our good fortune with our closest friend. I agreed, curious to see how Brady would play his role in whatever they had planned. Sunday dinner was a masterclass in manipulation. Brady showed up with a bottle of expensive whiskey and spent the first hour congratulating me on the inheritance and asking about my plans for the money. He was playing the supportive best friend perfectly, asking all the right questions and offering thoughtful advice. About halfway through the evening, Brady casually mentioned that he'd been talking to a buddy who worked in financial planning. According to this mysterious friend, people who inherited large sums often made the mistake of letting the money sit idle instead of putting it to work immediately. Laura jumped on this opening like she'd been waiting for it. She started repeating the same arguments she'd made Friday night, but now she had Brady nodding along and reinforcing her points. They were tag-teaming me, taking turns explaining why immediate action was necessary. Brady even offered to help facilitate whatever investment strategy we decided on. He said his financial buddy could expedite the paperwork and get us started right away. All I had to do was authorize the transfer, and they'd handle the rest. I listened to their whole pitch, asking questions and acting like I was seriously considering their advice. But inside, I was disgusted. These two people I'd trusted most in the world were sitting at my dinner table, drinking my whiskey, and trying to con me out of $50,000. When they finished their presentation, I told them I appreciated all the advice but wanted to consult with my own financial advisor before making any decisions. I mentioned that my grandmother's lawyer had recommended someone who specialized in inherited assets and understood the tax implications better than most general advisors. The reaction was immediate and obvious. Laura and Brady exchanged a quick glance that they thought I didn't catch. Brady started explaining why specialized advisors were often overly conservative and might cost me opportunities. Laura added that we shouldn't trust someone we didn't know with such important decisions. I stood my ground. I said I'd already scheduled a meeting for Tuesday morning and would make a decision after getting professional advice. I thanked them both for their concern but insisted I wasn't going to rush into anything. That's when things got interesting. Brady excused himself to use the bathroom, but I saw him pull out his phone in the hallway. Laura followed him a minute later, claiming she needed to check on something in the kitchen. I could hear them whispering but couldn't make out the words. When they came back, their whole demeanor had changed. They were both more aggressive in their arguments, more insistent that waiting was a mistake. Brady mentioned that his financial friend had said the investment window might close by Wednesday, that I needed to act by Tuesday at the latest. Laura started getting emotional again, talking about how important our financial security was to her, how worried she was about our future. She said she couldn't understand why I didn't trust her judgment after 10 years of marriage. The pressure tactics went on for another hour. They took turns arguing with me, supporting each other's points, making me feel like the unreasonable one for wanting to slow down and think things through. Finally, Brady left around 10 p.m., but not before pulling me aside and telling me he was worried about me. He said I seemed different lately, more suspicious and less trusting. He asked if everything was okay in my marriage, if Laura had done something to make me doubt her. After he left, Laura and I had our biggest fight in years. She accused me of embarrassing her in front of Brady, of making her look like some kind of gold digger who couldn't be trusted with financial decisions. She said my behavior was insulting and hurtful, that she couldn't believe I'd question her motives after everything we'd been through together. I let her vent for a while, then calmly repeated that I just wanted professional advice before making a major decision. I told her I loved her and trusted her, but that $50,000 was too much money to move around without proper planning. Laura stormed off to bed, slamming the bedroom door. I stayed up late in the living room, texting updates to Stetson about everything that had happened. This morning, Laura barely spoke to me before leaving for work, but around noon, I got a text from her saying she'd made an appointment with a financial advisor for this afternoon and wanted me to meet her there after work. I called Stetson immediately. He laughed and said they were getting desperate, moving faster than he'd expected. He told me to go to the appointment but not to sign anything, no matter what kind of pressure they put on me. The appointment is in 3 hours. Laura thinks she's backed me into a corner and I'll have to make a decision today. She has no idea that I've been documenting every conversation, every manipulation attempt, every lie. She especially has no idea that Stetson has been building a case against her for theft and fraud, or that Brady could face serious legal consequences for his role in all this. I'll update you guys tonight after the meeting. Something tells me this is going to be the beginning of the end for their little conspiracy. Final update. It's been a week since my last update, and I'm still processing everything that went down. For those of you who said this was going to be epic, you were right. For those who said Laura and her family were going to get what they deserved, you were also right. And for the person who predicted they'd all turn on each other when the walls came down, you called that one perfectly. The financial advisor meeting was exactly the trap I thought it would be. Laura had scheduled it with some guy she'd found who was basically running an investment scam. Stetson had warned me about these types, people who prey on individuals with sudden windfalls by promising unrealistic returns and charging huge upfront fees. I walked into that meeting with Laura acting like the supportive wife, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. She needed me to sign papers that day or her whole plan would fall apart. The advisor, some guy named Jared, had all the paperwork ready to go. All I had to do was authorize a transfer of $45,000 into his investment fund, keeping $5,000 as emergency cash. Laura sat there nodding along as Jared explained how this was a limited-time opportunity, how the fund was closing to new investors after that week. She kept shooting me meaningful looks and touching my arm, playing the role of the concerned wife who just wanted the best for our future. I let them finish their entire pitch, asked questions, acted interested, even praised Laura for doing such thorough research. Then I told them I needed to make a phone call before signing anything. I stepped outside and called Stetson. He was waiting in his car 2 blocks away, exactly as we'd planned. Within 5 minutes, he was walking into that office with a briefcase full of legal documents and the coldest expression I'd ever seen on a man's face. Laura's face went white when she saw him. Jared started asking who this was and why we'd brought another advisor to the meeting. That's when Stetson introduced himself as my legal counsel and announced that the meeting was being recorded for potential legal proceedings. Then Stetson opened his briefcase and started laying out documents on the table. Bank statements showing Laura's unauthorized transfers from our joint accounts. Copies of financial records proving she'd stolen nearly $15,000 over the past 18 months. Phone records showing the pattern of calls between Laura, Brady, Hilda, and Angela on the night I'd overheard their planning session. Laura tried to interrupt, claiming there had been some mistake, that she could explain everything. Stetson told her to remain silent while he finished presenting the evidence. Then she'd have her chance to respond. He laid out more documents, proof that Laura had opened secret accounts without my knowledge. evidence that she'd been researching divorce attorneys and asset protection strategies for months before the inheritance was even available, records showing she'd been moving money and preparing to disappear with Brady. Jared tried to leave at that point, claiming this was a personal matter that didn't concern him. Stetson informed him that as the proposed recipient of stolen funds, he was very much involved in a potential criminal matter. He advised Jared to remain seated and consider contacting his own attorney. Then Stetson turned to Laura and asked if she wanted to explain her actions before he contacted law enforcement about the theft and fraud charges he was prepared to file. Laura completely broke down. She started crying and apologizing, saying she never meant for things to go so far, that she'd gotten caught up in a bad situation and didn't know how to get out of it. She claimed Brady had manipulated her into the affair, that her family had pressured her into the financial scheme. I asked her how long she'd been planning this. When did our marriage stop being real and start being a con game? Laura admitted the affair with Brady had been going on for 3 years, not just since our honeymoon like I'd originally heard. She said it started during a rough patch in our marriage when I was working long hours and she felt neglected. Brady had been supportive and understanding, and one thing led to another. As for the money, she claimed that was more recent. Her family had been having financial problems for the past year. Hilda was underwater on some real estate investments, and Angela had run up massive student loan debt. When they found out about my inheritance, they convinced Laura that I wouldn't miss some of the money if it was moved around carefully. I asked her about the conversation I'd overheard on our anniversary. Why had they been laughing about me, calling me pathetic, discussing how to drain me completely? Laura broke down even more at that point. She said her family had gotten carried away, that they'd started seeing me as an obstacle rather than a person. She claimed she'd tried to defend me during those conversations, but her mother and sister had convinced her I was too naive to handle financial decisions on my own. Stetson asked Laura if she was prepared to make full restitution for the stolen funds and cooperate with dissolving the marriage without claiming any rights to the inheritance or our other assets. He explained that criminal charges were still on the table, but her cooperation might influence how aggressively he pursued prosecution. Laura agreed immediately. She signed documents acknowledging the theft, waiving any claims to the inheritance, and agreeing to an uncontested divorce with me, keeping the house and all other major assets. She also signed statements detailing Brady's involvement in the affair and her family's role in planning the financial scheme. After we left that meeting, I felt like I could finally breathe again. But the story doesn't end there. That evening, I called Brady and told him we needed to talk. I suggested he come over for dinner so we could discuss some investment opportunities I'd been considering. He sounded excited, probably thinking Laura had successfully manipulated me into moving the money. When Brady arrived, I had Stetson waiting in the living room. Brady's face went through about 5 different expressions when he saw the lawyer sitting there with documents spread across my coffee table. I told Brady I knew about the affair, about his role in the financial planning, about every conversation and meeting he'd had with Laura and her family. I explained that Laura had already signed statements detailing his involvement and that he was facing potential civil suits for alienation of affection and conspiracy. Brady tried to deny everything at first, claiming Laura was lying to save herself. But when Stetson started reading back specific conversations and dates, Brady's story fell apart completely. He admitted to the affair, but claimed it was just physical, that he'd never had feelings for Laura and certainly hadn't been planning to run away with her. He said Laura had been the one pushing for more commitment, talking about leaving me and starting a new life together. As for the money, Brady claimed he'd just been offering friendly advice. He said he'd never intended to profit from any investment schemes and had no idea Laura was stealing from our joint accounts. Stetson informed Brady that his intentions were irrelevant. His actions had contributed to the destruction of my marriage and the attempted theft of my inheritance. He offered Brady the same choice he'd given Laura: cooperate fully and face only civil consequences, or fight the charges and risk criminal prosecution. Brady signed similar documents acknowledging his role in the affair and conspiracy, agreeing to stay away from both Laura and me, and waiving any claims that our friendship had given him rights to knowledge about my financial affairs. The next day, Stetson and I visited Hilda and Angela together. This was the conversation I'd been looking forward to the most, because these two had been the masterminds behind the whole operation. Hilda answered the door and immediately tried to act like nothing had happened. She invited us in for coffee, asked how I was handling the inheritance, mentioned how proud she was of Laura for being such a supportive wife during this windfall. Stetson let her finish her performance, then pulled out his briefcase again. He laid out the same documents he'd shown Laura and Brady, plus additional evidence showing Hilda and Angela's direct involvement in planning the scheme. He'd obtained phone records showing dozens of calls between the three women in the weeks leading up to the inheritance transfer. He had text messages Angela had sent to friends bragging about a family plan to come into money soon. He even had evidence of online searches Hilda had conducted about inheritance laws and divorce asset division. Both women tried to claim they'd just been offering emotional support to Laura during marital difficulties. They insisted they'd never encouraged her to steal money or deceive me in any way. Stetson asked them to explain the recorded conversation from our anniversary night, where they'd all laughed about manipulating me and discussed draining me financially. He played back portions of Laura's statement where she detailed specific advice and encouragement she'd received from both her mother and sister. Angela broke first. She started crying and admitting that the family had been struggling financially, that they'd seen the inheritance as a solution to their problems. She claimed they'd only wanted to borrow money temporarily, that they'd planned to pay everything back once their own situations improved. Hilda remained defiant longer, insisting that families should support each other and that I should have been willing to help them without being asked. She said Laura had been foolish to handle things secretly instead of just talking to me directly about their needs. I asked Hilda why they'd felt entitled to money that wasn't theirs, why they'd decided to manipulate and deceive me instead of treating me with basic respect. Hilda's response revealed everything I needed to know about their mindset. She said I'd always been too easy to take advantage of, that my trusting nature made me a target for people who were smarter and more aggressive. She claimed they'd been doing me a favor by managing financial decisions I wasn't sophisticated enough to handle on my own. Even while facing potential criminal charges, she couldn't admit they'd done anything morally wrong. In her mind, they were the smart ones and I was the fool who deserved to be taken advantage of. Stetson offered them the same deal he'd given Laura and Brady: cooperate fully, stay away from me permanently, and face only civil consequences. Fight the charges and risk criminal prosecution for conspiracy, fraud, and theft. Both women signed the agreements, but Hilda made it clear she thought I was making a mistake by pursuing legal action against family. The divorce was finalized last week. Laura got nothing except her personal belongings and her car, which she was still making payments on. I kept the house, the inheritance, and all our other assets. She moved back in with her family, which created its own drama, since they were all barely speaking to each other by that point. Brady lost his job when his employer found out about his involvement in the scheme. Apparently, his company had strict policies about employees engaging in financial misconduct, even in their personal lives. He's been trying to contact me through mutual friends, claiming he wants to apologize and repair our friendship, but I've made it clear that ship has sailed. Hilda and Angela are facing their own consequences. Hilda's real estate license is under review by the state board after Stetson reported the ethics violations involved in her attempted theft. Angela was forced to withdraw from graduate school when her funding was pulled due to the legal issues. The most satisfying part is watching them all blame each other for the situation they created. Laura claims her family pressured her into it. Brady claims Laura manipulated him. Hilda and Angela claim they were just trying to help Laura save her marriage. None of them can admit they were willing participants in a decade-long deception. As for me, I'm doing better than I've felt in years. Living alone, in a house that's actually mine. Not having to watch every word I say or second-guess every decision. The $50,000 is safely invested with a legitimate advisor Stetson recommended, and I'm finally making plans for a future that's entirely under my own control. To everyone who followed this story and offered advice along the way, thank you. Your support meant more than you know. To those who said I should have seen the signs earlier, you were probably right, but I'm focusing on moving forward rather than dwelling on what I should have done differently. And to anyone who might be in a similar situation, trusting your instincts and getting proper legal advice early can save you from years of manipulation and betrayal. Don't let anyone convince you that wanting to protect yourself makes you paranoid or untrusting. The inheritance that Laura thought would fund her escape ended up funding her downfall instead. Sometimes justice actually does work out exactly the way it should.